Story 1. Not being in constant contact, just playing outside or hanging out with friends and only calling your parents on a dial-up phone if it was an absolute emergency. Story 2. Hitting up Blockbuster with your friends for a sleepover, picking out a movie or game, picking up a couple of pizzas and 2-liter sodas, and staying up all night playing couch multiplayer Nintendo 64 video games. Story 3. Gen Z here at the older end of the cohort. Rewinding a cassette tape with a pencil when it got chewed up. Trying to make your own mixtape off the radio and hoping you could pause it in time so that you did not record the DJ talking. Wait, I think they do not know what a cassette tape is either. Story 4. The joy when the house was hooked up to cable television and we had more than just what we picked up with the antenna. American Broadcasting Company, Columbia Broadcasting System, National Broadcasting Company, a fourth local channel and public broadcasting service. Now we had 40 channels. Story 5. Card catalogs. I thought I was the smartest kid because I was pretty good with the card catalog, and other kids would ask me for help. My kids had no idea what I was talking about. Story 6. Having to get up to change the channel on the television. Having to fine-tune the channel. And adjusting the antennas. Not knowing how annoying sunspots are. Having to wait for a specific time to watch your favorite show. And the agony of missing a show and then not knowing what was going on the next week. Story 7. It is a rare condition these days to read any good news on the newspaper page. Love and tradition on the grand design, some people say it is even harder to find. But, well, there must be some magic clue inside these gentle walls. Because all I see is a tower of dreams with real love bursting out of every seam. The absolute stranglehold Steve Urkel had on society and popular culture. Story 8. That the Challenger disaster occurred. That thousands of schoolrooms tuned in to watch because a teacher was on board, only to watch the disaster unfold live. That thousands of other schoolrooms would replay the video through the years to teach various lessons from the day. Story 9. I was watching a show from the 1990s with my younger brother, and one of the characters was using a corded phone. My brother asked if that phone was the type with the rotary dial. Story 10. I had a high schooler blurt out, "Hey, I know cassettes. They are what you watched movies on before Netflix was a thing." "No, that is a VHS tape," I said with a disappointed tone. Story 11. I'm 60, and there's a girl at my work who's about 21, and we were talking about movies. I brought up the movie Deliverance, and she asked who was in it. I said Burt Reynolds. She had never heard of him. I almost cried. Story 12. Our construction crew consists of members aged 44, 39, 36, me, 28, 22, and 20 years old. The 3 oldest among us, and sometimes the 28-year-old too, often ask the youngest two if they are familiar with certain things. I was recounting an experience from Home Alone and was talking about traveler's checks when I turned to the young woman and asked, "Have you heard of traveler's checks?" She said no, which made me realize that my story was only going to make sense to 2 of the 3 people I was speaking to, and it immediately dawned on me that I'm getting old. Story 13. I would walk an hour to my friend's house to see if he could hang out. If it was no, I had an hour walk back home. Also, allowing your kids to be outside. Story 14. You do not actually need a phone, and you do not need to be online 24/7. It might seem that way to young people born into the internet, but you can actually live without it. Story 15. I watched a teenager on the phone with information technology a couple of weeks ago. He was incapable of holding the phone against his shoulder. When he had to type or write, he had to set the receiver down. It was the funniest thing I've watched in a while. Story 16. My wife and I are in our early 40s. We drove to a hotel that shared a parking lot with a large mall where her mom and stepdad were staying on Black Friday. The parking lot was half empty. Half the stores are closed. Let me be clear, forget the 1990s Black Friday nonsense. But we were talking about 1990s mall culture and how going to the mall was fun as a teenager. You'd shop a little, maybe get a Cinnabon or a pretzel, you'd usually run into some other people you knew, and a lot of larger malls had a movie theater. It was just generally a pretty fun social outing. It's just something that, looking back nostalgically, was pretty fun and is no longer a thing anymore. Story 17. I literally had a conversation just yesterday with my 12-year-old that made me feel ancient. She has recently discovered Michael Jackson music, so I recommended a cool Michael Jackson music video for her to watch, and she wanted to know how I was even able to watch music videos when I was younger without internet or phones. I had to explain music television. I felt like a Neanderthal. Story 18, weird one, but I was talking to workmates. I am 45, they are in their mid to late 20s, and I mentioned the movie Young Guns. They had never heard of it and asked what it was about. I said, Billy the Kid, and they looked at me blankly. They had never heard of Billy the Kid. I know he is not a major historical figure, but Story 19. Sitting in front of the television on the channel guide while it slowly scrolls through all the channels. If you missed the channel you were looking for, you have to sit through it, slowly scroll back around again. Story 20. I'm only 18, but my younger teenage cousin called VHS tapes little movies in a box. I'm in a wheelchair and have been for my entire life, but hearing that made me want to jump off a bridge. Story 21. Cursive. Compound interest. How to find landmarks around town without an iPhone to tell you where you are and where you are going. Googling. My own opinion only, and I'll not argue because to each their own. Story 22. Figuring things out for themselves. It's so frustrating watching people stand around because they don't know how to do something, are waiting for someone to show them, or are waiting for someone to do it for them. This is true of people well into their 30s, too. Their excuses kill me. They say they didn't know, no one told them, or no one is helping them. Yet they don't ask and just stand there. Story 23. Bulletin board system, which was a pre-internet server. Dialing into someone else's server and being able to chat with about 7 people at once was pretty mind-blowing at the time. Playing old online games with leaderboards and things like Legend of the Red Dragon was quite exciting before internet browsers. Story 24. Something I didn't even think was that long ago, but kids don't even believe it, is that Netflix used to be a service where you had DVDs mailed to your house. Story 25. To save money the old-fashioned way, we used to have to clip coupons. We either got them from the Sunday newspaper, mailers, or big coupon books kids would sell for school fundraisers. I really missed those books. Now we have to download a store's app, and they use our data to maximize profits instead. Did I mention I really miss those coupon books? Story 26. How to read an analog clock. I teach middle school, and I have only met a handful of kids who can read a non-digital clock in my 8 years of teaching. Story 27. Broadcast television. One phone line for the whole house. Getting lost when driving and having to ask for directions or use a map. Playing outside until it got dark and nobody's parents knew where the kids were. Needing cash to pay for everything. Home cooking. Cursive writing. School clothes versus play clothes. Story 28. Sitting down as a family as Dad sets up the old cine film so we could watch our old home films. Nothing quite like playing it backwards so as to slide up the slide. Pure family time. Story 29. Encyclopedias. I miss them. I remember as a kid interested in science, I had just memorized all the details about all the planets and the sun in my head. I was such an insufferable show-off for those few years. My father, being a professor, gifted me way too many of those, and it was just addictive to learn new things. Somehow, having all the information and misinformation of the world at the tip of your fingers has lost the joy of learning something new for kids. Funny story. I had a floppy disk, remember those, which I once got from my father. I went home a few days back, was rummaging through my older stuff, and found it and kept it on a desk. One of the kids in my neighborhood came and asked where I got the icon for saving files from. Never felt older. Story 30. The dance to Saturday Night by Wigfield was at a kids' disco a couple of years ago. I was the on-site first aider before anyone thinks it was something creepy. The kids were dancing away to all the more recent stuff, like the cha-cha slide. Saturday Night comes on, and the kids all look confused. Adults start dancing along at the back of the room, and the kids are just looking at us all like we're from another planet. I'm pretty sure I aged about 50 years in that moment. Story 31. The fact that text messages cost money to send. Everyone has iMessage or Unlimited now, but when I was 11, I racked my parents' bill up to $400 one time. Laughing out loud. Story 32. Unique subcultures. Thanks to the internet and social media, subcultures with their own style and common threads have been subverted into surface-level trends without understanding the circumstances that led to their existence in the first place. Story 33. Back in the 28.8 kilobits to 56 kilobits per second dial-up times, I would start an album or game download right when I went to sleep, and by the time I woke up, the download would just be finishing. Story 34. My kids are 8 and 10. My husband found an old Motorola flip phone made in 2003 and charged it so they could play around on it. They think it's such a lark. It's so funny to see them play around on it. Story 35. Sitting by your boombox with a cassette tape, ready to press record and get your current favorite song ripped from the airwaves. Oh my gosh, and then later with the internet LimeWire. Story 36. The beauty of imagination or just getting dirty and playing outside. My little stepbrother and I used to shoot hoops a lot every Sunday afternoon. It was fun for me. We would rant or just goof around outside. Story 37. Calling your parents collect from a payphone to let them know it was time to pick you up. Slamming the phone receiver down to show how angry you were. Rabbit ears, antennas, on the TV that you had to stand and adjust until the TV picture was clear. Even better if there was tinfoil on them. As a kid, I was the remote control for my parents. My first stereo was an 8-track. I remember when we got color TV. I also loved Mr. Bill on Saturday Night Live. On Sunday morning, we would get the color comics and use silly putty to lift the ink and play with it. I'm Generation X and American. Story 38. My coworker's 10-year-old son came home from school and proclaimed, "Dad, today I learned that there's a rainforest named after Amazon." The kid literally thinks that the Amazon rainforest is named after Amazon, the company. Story 39. Walking to school. A lot of fun and social interaction took place on the 1.5-kilometer walk to school and then back in the evening. We were fit and had stamina. Story 40. Kids are calling new soccer players the greatest of all time, but we have Messi and Ronaldo who are still playing, and legends like Pelé from back in the day. Story 41. I went to a car show with my 20-year-old nephew last summer. He was amazed by all the custom stuff he saw in an Impala. I looked in and saw a stock factory interior and asked what he was talking about. He had never seen an 8-track player. My first car had an 8-track player. I feel old. Story 42. A pre-internet world, and a world where anything very technical was too expensive to own. I only experienced a glimpse of it. Born in the early 1990s, I remember needing to write down friends' numbers in a phone book and panicking if you misplaced the book. Or having phone conversations at a fixed location because your phone cord could only go so far. Or saying you will meet someone at a specific location and you have to trust they will be there. And they have to trust you're still attending. You can't just message to check in on each other. And reading books, playing instruments, making art, and going outside for entertainment. TV was okay, but as a kid, there were really set hours of content that actually appealed to you. It was a really basic time. Again, I only saw a glimpse, but I can feel the difference. It was like there were walls in the world and around people. It's not as instant and as transparent as it is now because we're so connected. Story 43. The concept of prepaid phone cards, the scratch-off ones, and phone regions with roaming. We took a trip. My boyfriend, a friend, our roommate, and I said something like, "Well, thank God we don't have roaming anymore." While using Waze and Spotify on the highway, the first 3 of us laughed, and the roommate asked, "What's roaming?" He's from 2002. We briefly explained how it worked and said, "That's why the phone cards were sold with regions." And he again had this look of, "Oh, I'm learning history from the land before time." I must say, when we all got out of the car, I felt like I needed a cane and to adjust my hearing aid. Story 44. How weird and disturbing it is that they're laughing about genuinely awful topics like racism, sexual topics, drugs, and violence. A child saying "hawk tua" is usually just considered normal and annoying. A child mimicking oral intercourse is not normal. A child jokingly using slurs is not normal. A child referring to pedophiles in conversation is not normal. We were allowed to be kids, playing the TV plugins, slipping on cheap lawn water slides, and collecting silly bands. If something like that was ever said by us, we'd be dragged to the nearest church, dunked in holy water, and beaten in front of the choir as the pastor screamed in tongues for the devil to release our souls. Children today are seriously mentally ill and society refuses to help them. Story 45, Boomer here. I was about to light a candle, so I got a box of matches out of the drawer. My neighbor's granddaughter didn't know what they were or how to strike it. I had to show her. So yeah. Story 46. So many things. Having to call the operator to make a long-distance call or to find the phone number of a person or business. Only having to dial the last 4 digits of a phone within a 5-mile radius. Regular leaded gasoline, setting the choke on the car, and letting it run for 20 minutes to warm up. Story 47. I once had a teenager about 14 or 15 ask me what rush hour was, and they did not know who Jackie Chan was either. That hit me so hard, remembering how much I loved the Jackie Chan Adventures show. And I am a 97, I am still young myself. Story 48. Waiting in line for a long time to use a phone booth. Then once you're in, close the door, drop some coins in the slot. Now you have to take a pee so bad you're practically hallucinating. Story 49. Most stores weren't open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and certainly not open on holidays. Long family drives with nothing to do other than stare out the window and maybe read a book as long as the sun was up. On a 2-day road trip to Washington State, we stopped overnight at a rest area, and my uncle slept on one of the picnic tables. The ride back was in a pickup truck bed with a camper shell over it. Paying for things at the store, even buying a carton of cigarettes while underage with my mom's check. I just filled in the amount when I got there. Also, picking up my parents' medication from the pharmacy, and the pharmacist knew who my family was. The weird echo in the phone line when talking on the landline to someone overseas. Buying a ton of candy at the neighborhood gas station with a pocket full of change.